Hi all. So today's topic of discussion is Porter's five forces, the five forces analysis of an industry. It is an important concept to understand about positioning of your organization in an industry, and it helps you a lot in terms of competitive strategies, in terms of profitability, and to change your strategy as per the need of your industry and your customers. Let us go in deep and understand what exactly Porter's five forces. So the five forces is a concept framework which I have already discussed for a better understanding of the competitive forces in an industry, and it helps to understand the economic value is divided among the industry actors. So I'll explain it in detail, but the basic thing which you have to understand is the five forces concept is being developed to understand the competitive forces in an industry and what exactly it can help you, and what are the parameters it can help you. We'll go through that. Apart from that, this is very much useful because when you understand the forces in your environment of or an industry that can affect your profitability, will definitely understand how the strategy has to be designed, and you can adjust your strategy accordingly. So let us understand who developed it and how you can analyze the things and how you can develop the competitive forces. So it was first described by Michael E. Porter in his classic at around 1975 in Harvard Business Review, an article, and that article become so famous or popular that people understood that the importance of the strategy, and he has given the insights about the revolutions in the industry and the strategy field and how it can shape the business in the future, and which being used now in the academic fields in MBA, BBA, and all this, like the concepts is very much important, the five forces of Porter. So let us understand what are the five forces and how these five forces will help the company. As discussed, it will help the company in terms of positioning. It will help the company to access the industry's attractiveness, and it the trends that are affecting the industry's competitiveness, and understanding who are the new entrants. So giving having said all these things, so let us understand these five concepts. So these are the five major concepts which Michael Porter was talking about. So threat of substitute, bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of buyers, threat of new entrants, and competitive rivalry. So you can see in the name itself you can have an understanding what exactly we're talking about. So threat of substitute, bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, competitive rivalry, threat of new entrants. Okay, these are the five forces which is being designed in the five forces analysis for an industry. So now think of your company or think of any industry that comes into these parameters. You can think of any industry and put out what are these things. But before going into an analysis of an industry, let us understand one by one. So what is bargaining power of buyers? So bargaining power of buyers is consists of some of these parameters, like understanding the number and size of your customers. How many number of customers you have, the size of your customers, and how price sensitive are your customers. Like if you increase the price, then what will happen? If the prices go down, so what is the next step? So how price sensitive are your customers? And let's say for your product you have a substitute product, so how the buyer will behavior about the substitute product. If they have the substitute product at a better price, whether they will swap or shift to that product rather than buying your product. So you have to understand that as well. And do you have the complete information about your buyers or buyers behavior? So do you understand how your buyer behaves while buying your product or services? So you have to understand this as well. Then the cost of changing, which I talked, like I had a discussion like about buyer's behavior towards the substitute. Like let's say you have X product and Y gets that Y gets a Y product, uh, like at a very low cost. The buyer gets the product at a lower cost. So then the cost of changing is very low. So these are some of the important parameters. There are two, three more parameters, but these parameters are something important to understand the bargaining power of the buyer. So we'll understand it more depth while discussing the examples. The similar way, it's about the suppliers. So if you run a manufacturing company, or if you do a product manufacturing, you can understand like the importance of the supplier there. So if you are manufacturing something, then you have to tie up with few of the suppliers to get the raw material. So right, so the suppliers maybe from the raw material end, or the suppliers from the other ends, which helps you to develop and design your product. So here also the same thing. Excuse me. Number and size of your supplies, price sensitivity, uniqueness of the service, and suppliers' behavior towards the substitute, cost of changing. So how many like number of suppliers you have, what is the size of your supplies, and if your agreement prices go up, then what would be the supplier's reaction? If it goes down, what would be his reaction? And what is the uniqueness of the service with your supplier? Like what exactly the supplier have in uniqueness? Like what is the USP of your supplier? And supplier's behavior towards the substitute. Like let's say you have a competitor for yours, and how supplier will behave. Like is it better to swap, or go to the other competitor to understand like better? So then you have to understand with complete information about your supplier, and how soon your supplier can like swap to the other competitor. You have to understand the cost of changing also. Threat of new entrants, yes. So when you are in an industry, so you should like analyze if a new entrant will come, so what would be the position. Like let's say whether for the new entrant, the barriers of entry is strong or low or high. Like you have to analyze that. You have to understand, like let's say if at all a new entrant will come, then what's the capital investment they require, whether they can invest on this, they can fight with us or not, right? If a new entrant will come, the customers you have, will they shift to that new entrant? Are they brand loyal to you? So those things, as well as what are the government policies are designed, and like how it is implemented and useful for a new entrant in your industry. And if it's a manufacturing company, then how soon the new entrant can access to the distribution channels. And how about the switching costs of your customers, your supplies, and substitutes? So these are some of the parameters which, in terms of an industry viewer, you have to analyze this, as well as vice versa for a new entrant. If a new entrant is coming to an industry, the new entrant should understand, like what are the barriers of entry for him, what are the economies of scale that he should look for, or she should look for. Brand loyalty, like whether the customers will have a brand loyalty or whether they shift or not. And the government policies and access to the distribution channel and switching costs. So these are for the new entrants. And substitutes, the same way around, they should understand what are the substitute products available in the market, and like how the substitutes performance, and what about the switching costs for the like customer, and what is the relative price difference between your product to the substitute product. Competitive rivalry. Competitive rivalry is nothing but the competition between your company and the other company, as well as within the industry. You should understand, like how many number of competitors you have, what is the diversity of competitors, and how the industry's growth and concentration between the competition, what kind of quality or difference you have with the competitors. And if at all, like let's say you have some amount of brand loyalty and your competitor has some amount of brand loyalty, which works better and which is higher than the the other one, and if at all a competitor is there, and what are the barriers to exit from that industry. And the switching costs is definitely will be there, like who is going to acquire or merge with other company, or if at all switch your position, like what would be the costs. So let us understand about all these parameters one by one with an example. So before moving into the example, let's understand like what you have understood from the Porter's five analysis. So Porter's five forces is a framework for analyzing the company's competitive environment to understand the positioning and have a better profitability. So the number and power of companies' competitive rivals, potential new markets, entrants, suppliers, customers, and substitute product that influence a company's profitability. Five forces analysis can be used to guide the business strategy and increase the competitive advantage. So these are some of the major key takeaways. And if you would like to have like in depth about the key takeaways and more about the content, you can look at the Investopedia website, where it is giving a very good understanding about these five forces key takeaways. And now let us understand about the example. Let's take an example of the sports footwear industry. So in the sports footwear industry, if you could see the overall market potential, it has to grow by 8.36 billion between 21 to 25, like 2021 to 2025, and the market's growth momentum will accelerate at 1.95 percentage. So that means the market is going good. And if at all we see like who are the players in the sports footwear industry, so these are some of the top players, these are some of the top global players, or the industry players which cater to the major profitability and competitiveness in an industry. So if you see like major of the sports industry is being occupied by Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour, and a few of these other companies which hold like complete some of the market share. So if at all, like let's say uh, understanding a sports footwear industry in terms of a new entrant as well as from the point of the industry analysis. So the first of thing, like if a new entrant has to come into this industry, what could be the barrier of entry? The barriers of entry will be very strong, because these people, these are the market players which has been in the industry since long, and to fight with these competitors and gain a market share is really difficult on an overall global market. So if at all a new entrant has to come, then they have a strong barriers of entry. And what is the substitute, like threat of substitute in this? So like let's say I'll give you an example. I use like Nike shoes. So if at all I would like to do a substitute, like I would like to choose for other product, then it's not about, let me give you an understanding, like it's not about shifting to a competitors. It's about substitute of the product. Like let's say I would like to buy jogging shoes, right? I have a jogging shoe and I would like to buy another jogging shoe. So I'll buy another jogging shoe, right? I do not shift the product, like I will buy a slipper or something, that I buy a simple shoe to give a substitute to the jogging shoes. So the jogging shoes are much important, and it has no substitute. Again, you have to go with the jogging shoes only. There is no substitute for that. Even if you have a substitute, that's not a perfect thing. So the threat of substitute for the products is very low. At the same time, the threat of substitute for the market players is also very low, and bargaining power of buyers. So after the evolution of the e-commerce, the power of the buyer is being moderate from the low. But initially it was very low, because when you have uh, a large market size of the buyers, then the bargaining power of the buyers will be very low, because the competitors in this field are very low and very few numbers. So these players can analyze, and they can discuss about the pricing, and they can manage or alterate the bargaining power of the buyers from the low to moderate. And what would be the bargaining power of the suppliers? The bargaining power of the suppliers is also moderate, and it was very low initially. Now it is moderate after the evolution of the digital era. So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say if they have to prepare some parts, some accessories of the shoe, then they need the cotton. So the cotton suppliers, let's say they'll come up and say that no, we are charging this, and the other competitor is giving it this price, and we will shift. So there are chances that they'll be shifting within this industry, and these are some of the market players where they'll be traveling here and there. So the bargaining power of suppliers is not much high, but it's moderate. So you have to understand about that the suppliers problem, and the thinking and the behavior, and you should have the complete information about your supplier, so that you should not miss out the supplier. Overall, the way the competitive rivalry is moderate for these players, but still, if you could see the new entrants, there are some of the new entrants are coming, but those are specifically to some geographies, not as an complete global market. So they are into specific to the some geographies. Even in India, you have few of the new sports footwear player manufacturers. So but competing with a market global player in the sports footwear industry is really tough, because when a new entrant will come, the new entrant has to think of like a huge capital investment is required. A lot of money has to be invested on your product quality, and lot of money has to be invested in terms of promoting your product company, and giving a better strategy, so as to beat the global players like Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, and Asics. So these are some of the players which has been there in the industry since long, and people or the customers are very much brand loyal, and it would be very difficult to convert the bias of these players to your company. It's a, from a point of the new entrant. But if you see in a point of an industry, that coming up a new entrant is very difficult. So hope you have understood the sports footwear industry an example. So now let us discuss about the smartphone industry. So it's a common thing that we all have a smartphone, and we frequently look out for the new options in the smartphone as we love to evaluate and understand what are the new options are coming up in the new phones, what are the new features and functionalities are coming. So the smartphone industry, yes, definitely it is growing. So, but let us discuss specifically to the Indian market, because I believe some of the huge market share comes up from the Indian market, and on an overall Asia Pacific market, and it has 42% growth in October by shipping 21 million units, and in 23 million units in September 2020. It's an all-time high time, it's an all-time high for a single month. So if you see, there are the competitors like Xiaomi, Samsung, Vivo, Realme, Oppo, and there are others. And major competitor, you have the premium, a smartphone like Apple, and some of the premium smartphones from the Samsung as well. So so if you see any new entrant has to come, then the threat would be not very high, and it's a moderate thing, because there are a number of smartphone companies are coming and joining the market. So it's a moderate thing, because uh, of the market size, because of the demand in the market, because of the size of the buyers and the number of buyers. So these are something that if a new entrant will think, then this is moderate. So they can join the race with the competitors, and on an overall industry point of view also, it's a moderate thing. But what about the substitute? So about the substitute, it's moderate to high, but let's see, like in terms of an industry. So what is the substitute you have for a smartphone? So either a tab or laptop, or something like the new innovative features of the phone. But on an overall point of view, those products have some of the functionality which smartphone do not have, and smartphone have some of the functionalities that either way around you will not be finding it on other products. But if you see on a substitute based product to the competitors, then you have number of competitors. You can have for the same price you can have a better product from the other competitor. So recently I've seen, there are few product from the Samsung which has, very good functionalities and features, and it costs you around, like some price, and at the same time, for the half of the price, you're getting with the same features and functionalities in, in Oppo and, Vivo. So if based on the users like requirement, if they'll think that about the pricing, about the price sensitiveness from the bargaining power of the buyer, then definitely it may hit to the Samsung. Because if it's a price sensitive case, then definitely they'll go with the competitor. If it is more about brand loyal, if it is more about understanding uh, why the prices are that much as compared to this guy, and understanding about the functionalities and features in more depth, then there are chances, like few chances that buyer can go with the Samsung. So the bargaining power of the buyers is also very high. But as the number of competitors are very high in the market, so the shift or the bargaining power of supplier is very low. But as discussed, the competitive rivalry in this industry is very high. Any new entrant can come and join here, as the barriers of entry is very moderate, and now it is going, low as well with the government policies and understanding and everything. So, as per the usage goes, these are the some of the things that may get changed. So, on an overall way, the smartphone industry, if we analyze on a five forces of new entrant, substitute, bargaining power of buyers, suppliers, and the competitive rivalry, then the industry has its own like definition. So it has been divided into these five different types of classifications. So the new entrant will always will have moderate, the substitute will be moderate to high, the bargaining power of buyers will be high, and the bargaining power of suppliers is low, and the competitive rival is very high. So hope like you have understood what is five forces of analysis from the porter's point of view, as well as the industry analysis and how it is useful, like in an industry. So as I've discussed about the sports footwear industry and smartphone industry in India, the same way around you can take an industry and analyze like these five different types of concepts, like what these concepts are useful and where it is useful, and how you can analyze an industry. Take any industry, do an analysis, and please whatever be the analysis you're doing, put it at the results or something like you need, or any query, just put it out in the comment box section. We can discuss further. Hope you have understood this concept and the video. Thank you for watching this video, and do subscribe to our channel Pi-MSquare Academy for more interesting concepts in video with real-time examples. Thank you.